Good morning, all, depending on when you're watching this. Good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a good old look at the top 10 Pokemon V. We're heading into a new year. This seems like a pretty good time to list the top 10 Pokemon V. And when I started doing this list, I was like, don't know if I'm going to end up being able to fill out this list. I mean, looking at truly good Pokemon V that deserve to be on this list, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. And, yeah. Turns out it was actually quite difficult, and there are two really good ones that I couldn't fit on the list. Now, it is important to note we are talking Pokemon V, not Pokemon V Max. So one of the ones that was on the shortlist initially and didn't make it was Leafeon V, which I do love, incidentally, for the ability to let you accelerate a grass energy. That's a really cool ability, but it doesn't really see much play outside of Leafeon V Max deck, so I've left it off. Umbreon V Max is awesome, but Umbreon V is kind of meh, honestly. It's fine, it's a decent enough card, but no one's playing Umbreon for the V. The Umbreon is there for the V Max. That's kind of the whole point. We all know that Mew V Max is probably the best deck in the game right now. It's phenomenal, but it's not really Mew V that's doing the heavy lifting. It's Mew V Max. So some of the Pokemon on this list do have V Maxes. Or at least one of them does. But what we're talking about here is Pokemon V, and if they're going to make their way onto this list, they are doing so because the Pokemon V is phenomenal, ignoring the V Max entirely. So a couple honourable mentions before we get going. There's no room on this list for Hooper V, which makes me sad. If you follow over at PokeStats, a brilliant Twitter handle which is doing a wonderful job collating online tournament results, you will see that Hooper is occasionally popping up and being mentioned as a proper part of successful decks that are doing well in recent online tournaments. The attack is fine, free energy 170, it's fine, it's nothing to write home about. But it is both a Psychic type and a Darkness type, which means you're hitting weakness on the Urshifu and on stuff like Mew, so that makes it a really, really good option. It's a good card that sees a bunch of play, and rightly so, doesn't make the list. Similarly, I really wanted to put Medicham on this list. I like Medicham. Now, Medicham's not the kind of card which is gonna be central to a huge amount of decks, but as a tech and something which is coming in occasionally, it's great. And I know there are some decks built around it. The phenomenal Yoga Loop attack lets you place 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, but if you knock them out doing so, you get to take an extra turn. It's a kind of game-swinging attack which can, well, at the risk of sounding obvious, completely swing games. It's phenomenal. But I don't think I can rightly put it on the list over any of the ones on here. And you know the rule at this stage. Feel free to mess with this list as much as you like in the comment section, give me your own top 10, etc. But if you're going to take a card off the list, you need to put a card on the list to replace it. So in at number 10, we've got Galarian Zapdos. And this is popping up in some decks more than others, and it seems to be waxing and waning and all of that. What I'm going to tell you is this list is not just about what's seeing the most play now, it's also about future potential and things of that nature. And I cannot help but think that Galarian Zapdos is just phenomenal. The ability reduces your attack cost by 1 colourless energy for each of your opponent's Pokemon V in play, and yes, that does include V Max and V Star. And if your opponent's got 3 in play, then for a single fighting energy you do 170, and you discard a special energy before you do it. Anything that is weak to fighting, like Gengar for instance, or anything that comes around in the future and ends up being good, needs to be terrified of this. Like, I'm a huge fan of Green and V Max. I think Green and V Max is awesome. But it's weak to fighting, so if that deck ever becomes too good, people can just tech in Galarian Zapdos. If Gengar ever gets too good, people can just tech in Galarian Zapdos. It is a phenomenal tech against a weakness which is pretty common, honestly. I mean, you know, Jolteon's another example. A lot of Darkness Pokemon, pretty much all colourless Pokemon, pretty much all Lightning Pokemon, they all end up with this weakness, and this is a great, great counter to it. In at number 9, we've got Eldegoss. Eldegoss isn't particularly fancy, and for that, I apologise. But Eldegoss is just a really, really good tech. You play it from your hand to your bench, and you get to grab a supporter card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. And that's it. That's what it does. But the fact of the matter is, that's actually phenomenal. It gets you back that boss's orders at that key point in the game so you can go ahead and gust for the win. It gets you a supporter card when you've got nothing else going on. It turns a ball search card, something like a quick ball, into that supporter card you desperately need to win the game. And for that reason, even though it's not the flashiest card on the list, it is always going to be absolutely amazing. In at number 8, we've got Zamazenta, and I don't know what to do with Zamazenta. This might be way too low. Now, Zamazenta, the hook of Zamazenta, as we all know by now, is that it's got that ability that blocks attacks from Pokemon V Maxes. Prevent all damage, not other effects, just damage, done to this Pokemon by attacks from all of your opponent's Pokemon V Max. So against V Max heavy decks, this just becomes a wall and is brilliant, because most Pokemon V can't handle Zamazenta. Sure, your attack isn't great, free energy 130 discard a special, but time you do a little bit of tanking, maybe a bit of healing, your opponent's Pokemon V usually can't handle it, and V Maxes are blocked. And initially this was phenomenal and saw a huge amount of play, then it dropped off a huge amount. Now we're seeing it popping up online more and more and more in these tournaments that are doing quite well. So I don't know is the honest answer exactly where this should go on the list, but I do know that it's seen a lot of play since it came out, it's still seeing play now, and we're in a very VMAX heavy format, so this deserves to be on the list. In at number 7, we've got Sableye, and there's a chance I've got this too high, but this is where I think it deserves to be as I record this right now. And Sableye has always had a huge amount of potential. 2 energy, 10 damage plus 60 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. And that builds up very, very quickly indeed. You know, if they've got 4 damage counters on, you do 250 plus a 4 on them, is 290, that's huge! You don't need to put many damage counters on to get giant one-hit KOs. And Sableye is the kind of thing that since it came out into the Sword and Shield base set, people have been trying to make work and seeing if it could maybe be good. And up till now, it's been middling. But Inteleon might be the thing that breaks it wide open. Because Inteleon gets to drop damage counters, we all know how amazing Inteleon is. Plus you're playing it with Drizzle, which is going to give you extra consistency, which is always a bonus. And like I've said, you don't need to drop many damage counters before Sableye starts absolutely wrecking face, and Inteleon starts dropping those damage counters. And if you can get Inteleon out nice and fast, Sableye becomes an absolute beast in terms of attacking. I'm seeing this popping up in more and more winning decks online. I think Sableye might be poised to become really, really good, or it could drop back again and remain a bit of a fringe card. I don't know, but number 7 seems about fair. Now, in at number 6, we've got Kricketune, and I still consider that Kricketune is criminally underplayed. I love Kricketune. Incidentally, Kricketune is one of my very, very favourite of the character rares from VMAX Climax. And I'm delighted to say I finally picked up a single of it yesterday. It is phenomenal. But Kricketune, you know, it's not about the attack or any of that. It's purely about the ability exciting stage. Once during your turn, you may draw until you've got 3 cards in hand, or if it's active, you may draw until you've got 4 cards in hand instead. And Kricketune has always been a little bit of a fringe card. It's not the real draw engine that we see all the time, but it's still there. And you see it popping up usually as a one-off in a whole bunch of decks. And it's a basic Pokemon with a draw engine that can sit there and draw you cards every turn. And I just adore this. And it's not seeing as much play as I thought it would. And I don't think it ever really has. But I still consider it to be a phenomenal card. And it's going to be around for a while yet. And I really do think Kricketune deserves a place at number 6. Now, in at number 5, we've got Suicune, a card that I did not take seriously enough, and has really proven to be a redonkulous top-tier card. Now, the ability here is wonderful. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is active, you can draw a card. Nice extra consistency, that is really good. And we saw this played a little bit over in Japan with, for instance, Altaria, which puts supporter cards at the top of your deck. and then you draw it with this, and life is good. Although that deck really used a bunch of supporters which rotated out in September, so that deck doesn't really exist anymore, and that's sad. But you've still got the draw power, and for 2 energy you do 20 damage plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon, yours and your opponent's. So you force your opponent into that super annoying situation where they want to not bench Pokemon, for fear of allowing you to do extra damage, but as soon as your opponent doesn't bench Pokemon to try and hurt you, you're kind of winning at that stage. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing for you. But it's also just a really, really good attack. And it gets played with Ludicolo. Not just with Ludicolo, as he's playing a bunch of decks, but Ludicolo is what we see a lot. And Ludicolo, when you evolve into it during your turn, your basic Pokemon do an extra 100 damage to your opponent's active. So now that somewhere in the region of 180 to 220-ish becomes 280 to 320-ish. Or if you get 2 Ludicolo out, realistically your one-hit KOing VMAXs pretty gosh darned easily. And you've still got the extra draw power, and it's still a good attacker without Ludicolo. And do remember that we actually do have both Raikou and Entei coming up in the near future. They should both be in Brilliant Stars that are basically the same Pokemon, but for lightning and fire. Yes, the HP and retreat cost are a little bit different, but they've got the same ability, they've got the same attack. As far as I'm concerned, they're the same Pokemon. So it's going to be really interesting to see which one of these ends up being the best. In at number 4, we've got Zacian, and honestly, not putting Zacian as a top 3 Pokemon V makes me feel nervous, and I might end up looking dumb because of this, but right now, this seems like the best place to put it. Now, we all know Zacian V has been out since Sword and Shield base. The ability lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, attach any metal energy you find to this Pokemon, and put the others into your hand. Or to put it another way, draw 3 cards, but if any of them are metal energy, you can attach them, though you don't have to. Now, it ends your turn, but in the early game, it's phenomenal. And in control decks, where you're going to end your turn without attacking anyway, it's phenomenal. Although those decks are really out of favour at the moment, even control decks tend to have recovery attacks rather than just passing. But either way, it's a great draw engine early game, it's a great draw engine in decks that don't attack very much, and it's got that energy acceleration that can help you attack a bit faster. Then, of course, you've got that really rather ridiculous attack that for free energy does 230, which of course is enough to KO pretty much any Pokemon V. And that's it. But when you combine how good an attacker it is with its ability and its utility as an early game or I'm not attacking ability in other decks, Zacian V really is amazing. The reason I've not put it top 3 right now is because those decks that use Zacian as a draw engine are really out of favour at the moment. And Zacian decks, although they're doing well and representing, I think it's fair to say they're not really the top deck in the format, so I'm forced to put it down here at number 4. In at number 3, we've got Galarian Moltres, and honestly, me putting Zacian not in the top 3 has more to do with the Pokemon in the top 3 than it does to do with Zacian. Now, Galarian Moltres is phenomenal. It's got an ability that attaches a darkness energy from your discard to it, although you can only use 1 per turn regardless of how many Galarian Moltres you've got. But you've then got an attack which is perfectly serviceable. Free energy, 190, 30 to itself. It's not great, it's fine. But when you combine it with the ability, you basically have a surprise attacker that can get off big attacks without having to dedicate any resources to it at all. And it hits weakness on Mew. And it hits weakness on Shadow Rider Calyrex. And it does enough damage to KO stuff like Crobat. And quite frankly, this is a really, really nice attack. If you attack with a decent attack on anything, this will come and mop it up. 190 is quite good. It'll get a lot of one-hit KOs by itself. And we've seen this played in a ridiculous amount of different decks. Go back to the Players' Cup and see all the different representation this had. Sometimes it's played as a random deck, sometimes it is the focal point of the deck. Any deck that's playing Darkness Energy kind of has to play this just for the cheeky attacks. It really is that gosh darned good. And maybe if we didn't have really good decks that were weak to it, and support Pokemon that could be one-hit KO by it, maybe it wouldn't be as good. But we do, so it is. In at number 2, we've got Crobat. And here, if you want to put Crobat in at number 1, I am not going to be mad at you. This is the one, incidentally, that does have a VMAX. And the VMAX is fine, but we're playing Crobat V for Crobat V. And the attack is fine, but really it's the ability Dark Asset. Play it from your hand to your bench, draw till you've got 6 cards in hand. For a long time, we have had basic early game Pokemon that'll help you set up. It was Shaymin, and then it was Dedenne, and now it's Crobat. And the fact of the matter is, these are amazing, and they always see a huge amount of play. Because in the early game, you really want to have that option of Quick Ball for a basic Pokemon to go and draw, or whatever ball search you might be playing. But use that ball search to go and get yourself a Pokemon that you can then start setting up. In the early game, you draw nothing, you're going to lose because you just have nothing and your opponent runs through you. So what do? You go and search out Crobat, empty your hand as much as you can, draw till you've got 6 cards in your hand, and then hopefully you've drawn a supporter and you're off. We are in the not too distant future going to be getting Lumineon, which incidentally has the same ability as Tapu Lele, in that you can just go and find yourself a supporter card and you're good to go. And at that point, yeah, maybe people will stop playing Crobat, but only because Lumineon is that gosh darned good. Nothing about Crobat being bad, even a little bit. This is a phenomenal card that is going to see a huge amount of play for the entire time it's legal. It is the best turn 1 option at the moment, and even decks that don't really want to play 2 prize Pokemon, most of them play 1 copy of Crobat, because you know what? You need an option in the early game if you just can't get going. There are so many decks that really don't want to play this, that do just play 1 copy anyway, because they need to get going. It is that gosh darn good, ladies and gentlemen, and it is going to keep seeing a whole bunch of play for a whole while yet. So what does that mean then at number 1? It's Genesect. And in my end of year Pokemon awards that I put up on Christmas Day, I told you that this was the best Pokemon V of the year. And I've had a good old time to think about it, and I am now convinced it is the best Pokemon V, regardless of time frame. And the thing is, this has a ridiculous ability and a ridiculous attack. I honestly think that this might be a little bit of a mistake, and this might be a little bit too good. I could see this being wheeled back in the future, because it's got an ability that says once during a turn you may draw cards until you've got the same number of cards in hand as you've got Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, which is usually going to be 6. So I can draw until I've got 6 cards in my hand, but this is not limited to once per turn, it's once per turn per Genesect. So I can use this 4 times during my turn. I can draw 24 cards during my turn. That is absolutely ridiculous and broken, and yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Then it's got an attack for free energy that does 210 damage, and sure, that's 10 away from getting a one-hit KO on everything in terms of Pokemon V, but it'll get most of them. It's just ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely ridiculous. I think the ability is literally too good, and I think it might have been a mistake to print it being that gosh darn good, but that's all a moot point at the moment, because it has been printed, and I feel pretty gosh darn confident calling Genesect the best Pokemon V. But now it's over to you guys. I want to know what you think about this. I want to know if any of these are too high or too low. Remember, you cannot just put Pokemon in, you got to take Pokemon out. You can't just drop Pokemon, you got to put Pokemon above them, etc. Do it properly. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.